Roger, thanks for dropping by. Quick bit of kitchen time and have a go at trying to save parts of this plant. It grew wrong. It basically pushed out its new growths really high up, and consequently the roots are in the air. And Miltoniopsis are probably, in my environment, the most fussy, awkward things that I attempt to grow. They seem to be stressed by, well, I was going to say everything, I think would be a better way of putting it. They just don't like my environment. It's not their fault, it's my fault for getting them and then trying to grow them in an environment they're not too keen on. As far as fussiness is concerned, they don't like to dry out ever, for a start. They like to stay moist. But if you get their roots soggy, they will rot. So you've got to try and get that happy balance, that lovely expression, evenly moist, which is not possible, because when you water them they're soaking wet and then they start to dry over a period of time. But that's the expression that you've got to aim at, is evenly moist. That's not, I thought that was scale, it's just a mark. So that's the roots. When their roots are in a good medium, and that's the other thing, if the media starts to break down, the roots will go. No messing. It's not like over quite a long period of time, they'll just keel over and rot. They do like some air in the media, but they won't grow with lots of air. So I always use a small bark, and in this particular case, because it's a rescue, or it will be, it's going to be heavy on the sphagnum moss as well. Now I don't know how much of this plant is even viable, but it's not going to grow as it is. This old bulb here is too low down to do anything with. And this media has a little bit of a mushroom whiff about it, which is not good, not with these. I mean, quite honestly, if you've got a healthy root system on one of these, they'll put up with some of the other things that stress them out, like too much heat, too much light, not enough air movement. You name it and these will suffer from it, along with Nellie Islas. Again, I've found that might be just my environment, but I don't grow Nellie Islas very well. I've killed many. And I've killed a fair old few of these. At the moment I have 4. 2 are named and 2 are just no ID hybrids like this one. These blooms are just starting to go, which is why I'm doing this now. I'm quite happy to sacrifice that bloom. But it's difficult to know what to do. The 2 latest growths, the best part of the plant is not that, and that didn't have much of a root system. That's highly unlikely to do anything ever. And then I've got this other one bulb that's old. Leaves are starting to go. I think that's going to have to come off too. I've got to get these roots. Yeah, some roots, but not good. And that leaves me something that possibly I can get down into some media. There's 2 plants there. There really is 2 plants there. Now that's a bonus. I know that sounds daft because I've now got 2 tiny little plants, but it means I've got 2 plants I can get down in some media. I'm taking the old sheaths off because on Miltoniopsis, if they're strapping plants growing really well and happy in their environment, their roots will push through those sheaths and grow into the media. But if they're a little weak, you tend to find that the roots will grow up inside the sheath and then they're in the air, and they'll often just stop growing once they hit the air because they're not getting hydrated. So I have some roots near the base of the plant. I might have to play tricks with this one. See, if I take this bulb off, I'll have nothing left but a single bulb with some new roots starting. But that's probably not enough of a plant to get going. So I think I'm going to have to leave that old bulb. And quite honestly, it's going to have to go quite low down in the media. I've got no choice. bad are these roots. See, some are gone. They just pull off like that. They're of no use. And a lot of these are in that state. They're just not very good. I'm not going to have much left, am I? But these are the older roots on the older part of the plant. I think I'm going to have to leave what's left. That's not much of a plant to pot up, not much at all. I'm taking advantage of what is said to be the break in the weather. Now, the bloom spike's coming off. Blooms are fading, so I'm not sacrificing two or 3 weeks worth of pretty blooms. They've had their time and they've looked good, and I've been pleased. Because the one thing it did do, I'm going to take the base of that rhizome off. You're all going to moan I haven't sterilised my scissors, but these roots aren't too bad, they're not brilliant. Some of them are going. I'm going to take that one off there, it may branch, may not. But what I'm after is these little roots here, these newer ones, getting down in some media and hopefully pushing on before it's too late. And what I'll have to do is plant it at a slight angle so that this isn't buried in the media, because that won't do it any good at all. But I don't want to take it off, otherwise I end up with a single bulb and there'll be no strength in that at all. So those are my two pieces. That doesn't seem like a lot left, but I'll plant that in such a way that the older bulbs are not buried as best I can, and at the back of the pot leaving the two new growths with room to move, because any new growths that are going to form will come out from these new bits, they won't come out from the old bits now. And we'll see if we can rescue it. The Her Alexander that I did not that long ago was in exactly the same state as this, and since that got its media refreshed, despite the heat, seems to actually be pushing on now. So these really do not like any build-up of salts in the media whatsoever. They don't eat a lot, so you don't need to keep pouring the stuff in there, which will only stay there if they don't use it. So I'm going to see if I can rejuvenate this and get it going again. I mean, I think this was a £5 plant in a do-it-yourself store. Ooh, pretty blooms, ooh, fragrant, must have, despite the fact that they don't grow very well for me. So the other three are coming on. Two are doing well, I must say, and the Her Alexander is coming on now. Doesn't show any signs of going downhill, having been treated exactly like this. So I'm hoping this one will do the same, given that the heat should drop. So, right, we'll get this mess out of the way, get some media and get it in a pot. We'll get them in a pot. It's two plants now. I'll be back. Right, let's have a go then. Notice, hell of a difference, and I would use a slightly smaller pot if I could, but the next size down is tiny. I need a couple of the in-between ones, so next time I see Peter White I will stock up on some smaller but not tiny pots, which is what I'm desperately short of. Things like the Masdevallias and the Strepias, they don't need giant pots, and in the case of those they don't really need deep pots. Most of those are relatively shallow rooted, so there are still some manky bits in this Orchiata that are just wafer thin and flaky, and they'll break down quick, so they're better off out if I can spot them. I never get them all, but a couple of bits of wood not bark, wood. Still, that's about the best to do. I put some large bark in the bottom. It's an air cone pot, and I see no point in putting very fine media on top of an air cone because it defeats the object. The idea of an air cone is to get airflow in round the base of the pot, and it stops that layering effect where you get a soggy bottom, which we don't want, and dry at the top. It helps quite a bit with that. Stock up on the stock up on the caffeine. There's only half the caffeine there used to be in my coffee now because I'm using half and half. I just drink so much of it that, you know, as one gets older, caffeine can have an adverse effect on arteries and cholesterol and all sorts of things. So I thought, well, if I can't taste the difference, then I'll go that way. And I can't taste the difference. And the decaf type coffee I'm using, I looked it up. I don't just blindly go into these things, because I've heard some pretty bad stuff about the chemicals and process that's used to get the caffeine out of the coffee. But this is very good caffeine, decaffeinated coffee. It's done by using some sort of high pressure water and CO2. So it hasn't got loads of chemicals in it. It's just coffee with the caffeine taken out, or most of it. I doubt they get all of it out. And it's the same make as the other, as the normal coffee that's in the mix. So it's just half and half at the moment. I'm happy with that. Do a little bit for my health, I'm sure. If I didn't drink so much of it, I wouldn't worry, but I'd probably get through. That's not a large mug, it's not a builder's mug that holds a pint. It's quite a delicate little thing. And I'd probably get through at least half a dozen of those of a morning, sometimes 8. There's quite a lot, so to halve the caffeine content is quite a good idea. I keep thinking that mix looks okay, and I'm happy with the moss, but I'm going to go heavier. I'm going to actually stomp this moss up a bit. If it had a good root system, I wouldn't go heavy on the moss. I'd just do my normal sort of half and half, but the small amount of roots, an extra little bit of moss in there will encourage them to grow and stop the pot drying out so fast. Right, that'll do, I think. It's not a bad mix. Right, I've got some steaks and the last dregs of my raffia. I do have more on order. Don't use it that often, but that roll of raffia, this stuff, it's just paper raffia. There's no strength in it. My theory is that if I'm tying something, there's a reason, but that reason will go away eventually. It's normally to hold something stable in its pot while its roots get established. So after a while, that raffia stuff breaks down, especially if you get it wet. So I've got some more coming, but it hasn't arrived yet. Right, let's see what we can do. But I'm pretty confident these two pieces are not going to stand up on their own. Right, especially as I'm going to have to put them in at an angle. You can see where the roots are. Well, there's no point in doing this if they're still going to be in the air. I need them in the pot, but if that's the level of the media, that bulb would be over half in the media, and chances are it may well rot. By leaning it over like that, I can get the new roots down in there and the old bulb not. And I'll have to do the same with this one as well, because this is playing the same trick. What I'll do is I'll put them in opposite directions. Actually, I can't, can I? I need the new growth in the middle of the pot and the old growths down the back. So we'll lean them both towards the centre, with the new growths with the roots on near the centre of the pot, and the older bulbs around the back. And if you're worried about burying pots, there's nobody says that your media has to be the same height in the pot. Yeah, it doesn't have to be. You can have it quite low in one place and high in another place. So round the back of the plants, yeah, where the old bulbs are, I'm not going to put so much in. But the roots that I've got, albeit not very good, I do want in something. So they're going to have to put some media around the back. And then when they're angled over, I need to get some down in the gap. The gap between the two. So I should be able to push those back a bit, seat them in nicely, and then the media will sit round the front a little higher, because that's where those new roots are. Brittle roots on these, they will break quite easy. So an amount of gentleness, especially physically where the roots are. If you want to push your media down in a bit harder, go around the edge of the pot gently. You can build up some quite solid media without actually touching the roots under normal circumstances, not under all. Right, how are we doing here? A bit fiddly this is, to try and get those new roots into something and get them going, but as I say, this worked, this treatment worked on the Her Alexander, which is now growing on. The roots are starting to extend. So it was appreciated, the plant actually appreciated new media, and it's what were aerial roots getting in something. And it's actually growing on now. I know for a fact this is not going to be firm in the pot or anywhere near it. They're both wobbling, so I doubt if I'll be able to use one stake on both of them, so I'll have to use I'd like to try and stake the old bulb, not the new one. This is not easy. Yeah, that's quite good. So that one, if I tie that old bulb now, it'll hold the new bulb in place. So we'll have a go at doing that. Don't normally do this sort of thing in the morning. Normally do it sort of late afternoon when I've finished with all my other chores, but the chore list today is minimal. My mounts are just going to get a spray. That's all they're going to get today. So they got fed and watered really well yesterday, sort of like midday. So although they had a hot afternoon to put up with, they didn't do bad. Alright, so this bulb is so low, I'm going to have a job to tie the bulb. I might end up having to go around the leaves, which I don't normally do, but I'm not going to tie it tight, so it's not like they're going to get garrotted. You just need some form of stability so that every time I pick the pot up to water it, the plant doesn't wobble around too much. And hopefully those roots will take off reasonably quickly. That's one done, sort of. Alright, so the other one's actually going to be easier to stake because the older bulb's not quite so low in the pot. Gotcha. Yeah, I'll still end up having to tie the leaves, that's meant, but to say, this raffia doesn't last forever, and eventually it will just break. It will just come apart. Hopefully by then the stake's no longer required. I mean, some of the great big strapping dendrobiums, you know, sometimes you need to stake them and to keep them upright, especially nobly types, and they can require their stake to stay there some considerable time. But most of the smaller plants like this one, the stake's only a necessity over the short term, not long term. What are we doing there? Not so bad. And as I tie this knot, it's going to pull that back bulb upright because it's a little bit too slopey at the moment. That one done. That should stop them wobbling about quite so much. It's not going to stop them wobbling completely because the media's not been banged in tight. Some root systems I'd be happy to really jam the media in to hold the plant, but not these. Now what I'm going to do is push the media down where the old bulb is to lower it in the pot so that it's not sat quite so deep, leaving the newer one higher up. That's what I said, the media doesn't have to be at the same height throughout the pot. So the media at the point where the newer roots are is now quite high. around the back it's quite low, so that those bulbs aren't completely submerged. I'm just checking, I could do with a little bit more in between the two plants because there are some roots there. Can I get a bit in there, or is it I'm going to do more harm than good, I think. Just a little bit. I know it's only 2 roots sticking out there, but when you've got so few, you know, 2 as a percentage of the total root system is quite high in this case. Yeah, they're quite sturdy. Not absolutely rigid, but quite sturdy. As I say, Miltoniopsis roots do need some air around them. They don't like being in a soggy, solid mass. But they do need quite a fine mix. So you see there's quite a high percentage of moss, so that'll get a good watering now. These must not dry out, and then we'll see how we do. There's no tag in this. I will do a tag for it. It has no name, but the tag will identify its colour. Yeah? Do I need to? Actually, I don't need to, because the other 3 are all labelled. One's got no name, but it's the yellow one, and it's got a tag in it that says this is the yellow one. That was a gift. And the other 2 have both got names, and they've got tags in with names. So the one without the tag is the purpley coloured one that we saw the blooms of recently. So there we go, and we'll see if it'll pull on. And hopefully with the weather breaking, it'll be growing on in more suitable conditions. So good watering. Back down in the shade, in the cool, or the coolest place I've got, where the humidity's at its highest, and we'll see if it will grow on. Its future really lies in the 2 latest growths that have both bloomed. They both spiked, even though they're tiny. They both have reasonable leaves, and they do have some roots. The future of these 2 plants is the next growth, rather than what's there now. So it's up to these 2 latest growths now to push out some new growths with some more new roots, and then it'll get going again. And hopefully it will be doing that towards the end of the year, when it won't be quite so stressed out with this incessant heat that we've been having. These don't like heat. If you want to grow Miltoniopsis, they need cool, moving air. If you can't do that, that's stress number 1. Next, they don't need bright light. They need reasonable light, but they don't need bright light like normal Oncidium alliance types. Yeah, so they need a little bit less light than that. Their roots mustn't dry out, and they need quite a fine media to get those smaller roots into. And the media must not start to break down under any circumstances, because the roots will go very quickly on these. Very, very sensitive roots to anything other than nice, fresh, clean media. Anything other than that, and they object. And they suffer from all of those problems. If you can restrict those problems to 1 at a time, they'll probably do okay. You get more than 1 of those problems, it'll struggle. You get 3, it'll probably die. I don't know why I bother with these. They are not easy for me. If I lived possibly up in the north of England, where it's just cooler generally speaking, I suspect I'd be able to grow them a bit better. But South Coast is renowned for its better weather, and the consequences are there are some things that are just not easy to grow, and this are one of them. Okay, see you next time. Bye for now.